Welcome to the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I'm here with Tom Roberts from Riff Raff.
Hello, hello.
And we are going to do a podcast that's kind of a hodgepodge of things. We have like one sort of main topic that we're going to talk about, or two that of like recent news, and then some books that we're looking forward to. But I want to start out because I have some banter for you, actually. Today, I was putting together a press release, and I had to look up, as part of that press release, when we started recording this podcast. This is going to be episode number 128, but do you have any idea of when we started, when the very first post went up of the 3% Podcast number 1?
My guess would be April of 2011.
Did you look that up?
No.
It is April 27th, the exact day that we're recording this, in 2011. So 6 years ago today.
Well, I knew that it was shortly after I started at New Directions.
Oh.
And I had started there in January, of 2011. So
fair enough. Here's the description. For the 3% Podcast number 1 was Literary Revolutions, Awards, and Death Rays. And it says, this week, Tom and Chad talk about the Penworld Voices Festival and the upcoming Best Translated Book Award ceremony. Along the way, they talk about Vladimir Sorokin, his Siberian earth fuckers and how he's really not like Bolaño, the overratedness of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and the Hungarian author Laszlo Krasznahorkai.
Wow. At least we stayed true to ourselves.
6 years later, this is basically what we could just copy and paste this.
It's true. You just swap out Garcia Marquez for Murakami every few episodes, and it's totally the same.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what we talked about Gabriel Garcia Marquez for.
Did he die? No.
I don't think he died until 2014.
Yeah, that seems wrong.
It must have been just a random thing. Maybe there was like a special event at Penn. But I guess you could talk. So you both related to this. So the Best Translated Book Award party and announcement of the winners will be taking place on next Thursday, May 4th. It'll take place at 7 p.m. exactly, but there's a party in New York City at the Folly, which is 92 West Houston Street, that will start at 6 o'clock and run past the announcement, obviously, as people will sit around drinking and celebrating and talking about stuff. And everyone listening to this podcast that happens to be in New York City is more than welcome to come to that. So that will be that ties directly into what happened on episode number 1. But also, Penn World Voices is also going on next week, and I know that you guys are going to be in town for that as well. Or do you have any events that you're planning on going to, or anything that you're doing for it?
For Penn? No.
Yeah.
I know that it's going on, but no, we're coming in just to go to the party for the Best Translated Book Award, basically. It's very easy to see everyone I want to see right there.
That's true.
All the translators, all the critics, all the judges, everybody right there.
Yep, which is perfect. I haven't looked too carefully. I looked through the Penworld Voices calendar one day, and I wrote down a couple things I'd like to go to, but they're also since they are all $17.
That's also that. I mean, I'm just fundamentally opposed to that sort of model. And I just can't give myself over to it, no matter who it is. So tell me, who is the country/region of honor, or whatever it is they call it this year?
They don't. It's women. It's women in literature is the focus.
Women in literature.
I believe that's the title of it. And what's weird is now I can't even find the link. Yeah, there it is. It is, what are they calling it? They don't have it, but I've seen on their emails, and their sort of theme is women in literature, or women in gender, I think is what it's called. I don't know who is the keynotes exactly. The people that I know about that I'm going to is that one of our authors, Bae Swa, who's going to be here in Rochester before then, she's doing an event, which I don't think I'm going to be able to go to, but Dubravka Ugreshik will be in town the whole week, and she's doing an event on Saturday that is called Forbidden, that has Alexander Heeman on it, and a couple other people. I forget who else is on it, but Forbidden, too nationalistic, and she's going to be on there, Alexander Heeman, so on and so forth, and that's on Saturday at Cooper Union, and that's the one that I'm officially, absolutely, definitely going to. The other ones I was afraid to buy a ticket and then find out that I would not be able to be there.
There's a lot of men on here.
They're all moderating. They're all gonna mansplain the
They are. Can I just say, Rita Mae Brown is going to be there?
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I didn't. Yeah, I read that. Or what is the name of the famous book of hers?
Oh God, they're all just amazing. For anyone who doesn't know, Rita Mae Brown writes cat mysteries.
Yeah, I never read the cat mystery, but I read the Ruby Fruit Jungle. That's what it is.
Let me just read some of these titles for you.
Oh God,
is this the right ones? Wait, where's the cat pun ones?
I've got a great one for you right in front of me. If you want. Well, first of all, it's Rita Mae Brown and Sneaky Pie Brown who write the books, right?
Whisker of Evil, Puss in Cahoots, The Perfect Murder with Santa Claude, Hiss of Death. Hiss of Death is pretty great.
A Hiss Before Dying is the new one.
Hiss Before Dying is also pretty fantastic. The Litter of the Law.
Oh my God.
Murder, She Meowed. Like the list. I mean, there are 26 of these, by the way.
Holy shit! I didn't know there were that many.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Anyway, I'm glad we Penn is getting some genre writers, for lack of a better term. Who else? Laurie Anderson, Carrie Brownstein. Not a lot of writers whose names I recognize, but I do see a lot of men.
Yeah, it was never going to be exclusively, obviously, but I think that most of the main events are focused on.
I was going to say it doesn't say anything about that here on their website.
It's very true. I'm going to see if I can find their official thing. The email that they sent last is like internationally acclaimed women at Penn World Voices Festival. And you can use like a code Women 2017 for $5 tickets to some of the events that are focused exclusively on women, like Pushing Past Glass Ceilings featuring Valerie Graves, Rita Mae Brown, Gianni Braschi, and Teresa Ryback, moderated by Amy Siskin. Forbidden, Too Much Love, which has some people on it. Gender Power and Authoritarianism in the Dystopian Age, The Body Politic, Women's Rights and Resistance, Art, Gender, and Social Justice, Poetic Duels, Sherry Jangi, The M-Word, Muslim American Women and Power and Beauty. Those are all seem to be like the women and gender more exclusive ones. So I guess maybe I know that they talked about this in some way that was kind of the focus this year, but that's the email that I think stuck in my mind as being like, oh, this is the main focus. If you're to make like a little thread of things, I suppose.
So are you aware that we're competing, the Best Translated Book Award finalist announcement is the winner is competing with like 6 events?
Yep. There isn't much that you could do, but the main one that it's competing with of those, so the ones that are going on at that time, there's a handful of them that are like the Resonances at Baruch College, which Esther Allen will be at, so she can't be there. And the party with that is like Teju Cole and Samantha Schweblin on it. And then the other big one is the Literary Quest Westbeth edition that has like 20 authors where you go and sit in people's rooms and listen to them talk to you or read stories at you in like a small, like very intimate sort of setting. There's a bunch of authors on that. And that's the main one that we're sort of up against, I think.
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, there are several that start at like 6:30, several that start at 7.
Every day I check, there's more too.
Yeah. Where's this? Valeria Luiselli is with Hannah Tinti at 6 o'clock, 7:15. Yeah.
Yep. But all the cool kids will be at the party.
Cool. Yes, this is true. This is very true. I'm certainly not going to any of these events.
Yeah. I either. They have but if you're interested in the events that are going on, you should check out worldvoices.penn.org because there are a lot of things. And
there are a lot of things.
I do feel like they're adding on things maybe within the past 2 weeks that they've added on some different events. So, because every time I look, it seems to be more stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I really admire the people who put on their shoes and go to like as many of these things as possible. There was a time when I did that. I don't have the energy anymore. Yeah, it's just too much to take in. I don't know. I'd rather, spend time with, a few people and really spend time and be present and all of that, and not run around the city for 3 days.
Yeah, I do remember when it first started going to a lot of them, but they were also free at that point in time.
Yes.
Or I was like on a list, so it didn't make any difference. And could just go to all the different events and write about them and meet people, and it was very, very fun. And I think that if you just still did that, that would be great. For especially if people are younger and had more energy and wanted to really immerse themselves, it is a great opportunity for that. By contrast, though, I think back in those days, a lot of them started they were spread out between 2 p.m. and the evening. And now a lot of them are basically in the evening when more people can go to them. But that means that there's a lot more overlapping events than there was in years 2 and 3 or whatever.
Yeah, I always thought it was weird to have those events during the day. I mean, it was so obvious that the only people who could go are other writers, translators, or college kids. And, you miss a huge chunk of the population that would be interested in these events who, have day jobs. And it's a shame that it took so long for them to realize that, it's better to do things at night. And look, yes, it sucks that you have to choose between, maybe you can go to 2 different ones in the same night. You can't go to all 6 that you want to because they're overlapping or whatever. But that's how it goes. You don't see every movie at a film festival either. So,
yeah, it's totally cool. And there are a lot of interesting things on here, a lot of interesting writers. Even looking through this, there's more and more every time. So, Jeff Vandermeer's on here, Marge Piercy. Yeah. That's wild. So, yeah, so it's definitely worth checking out. I don't know if I get to any of them. I might write something up on the website, but I'm not sure that I'll be able to because I have way too many other appointments. Way too many. This I want to tell you because I want to ask if you knew about this. I just got an email about the Oxford Translation Day, which is taking place in June. Kyle will be there for representing Latvia for all their various, I don't know. I think that they have panels or symposia or whatever. But they also are having the Oxford Wienfeld Translation Prize, which is being given out. They have a short list now, and the winner's being given out on June 3rd. And the short list is pretty straightforward, Ben Ficini for Liddy Silver's Cry Mother Spain, which I didn't know existed, but I'd like to read. Philip something Irish, which I don't know how to pronounce, for a book. Natasha Wimmer, Frank Perry for Lena Wolf's Bret Easton Ellis book. Lisa Dillman for Yuri Herrera's The Transmigration of Bodies. And then the last one was one that caught my eye, where it says Arthur Goldhammer for Stefan Hewitt's adaptation of Marcel Proust in Search of Lost Time, Swan's Way. And so I didn't know what that was. Do you know what this is?
No, but I know who the translator is and what Proust is. What does that mean, adaptation?
So that's what I wondered. It is a graphic novel adaptation of Swan's Way. There are, I guess, 5 volumes that are already available in French. And Arthur Goldsmith.
These are the ones that, what am I trying to think of? Live Right is doing?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, we had them at Albertine in French, and people would buy them all. Because I think all 7 are available. No?
I don't know. The article that I read in The Guardian is from last year, and it indicated that there were 5, but that's also may be out of date.
Yeah, they also broke it up differently than the way the books are broken up, if that makes sense. There's a prelude, I want to say, and there's all sorts of weird stuff. So, wait, because this is Oxford, does this mean that the books have to be published by somebody in the UK?
Yes.
So who's the UK publisher of?
Gaelic Press.
Gaelic. Oh, that makes sense. They're not my kind of graphic novel. I mean, they're very old-fashioned kind of illustrate. It's basically an illustrated version. You know what I mean? But it's very quaint, old-fashioned illustrations. It's not, particularly gripping sort of visually, but people love Swan's Way. People love Proust, and getting it down into a smaller format, I suppose, was inevitable, right?
Yeah. The review I found on The Guardian was basically this is kind of the piano reduction of an orchestra or of a symphony.
It's just hard. I mean, the beauty of Proust is just how dense and elaborate the sentences are. And if you're breaking them up for the sake of a panel on a page, you just kind of lose that.
Yeah, it is kind of weird to see it as just basically as the conversations, because most everything obviously is not going to be an overarching narrative. There are pages that have just narrative. But it's interesting. I didn't realize that this existed, but it is like, it's cool that it's two levels of the translation, because it's a translator adapted from the original into the graphic novel form, and then he had to translate the French into English to fit within the graphic novel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if Goldhammer didn't do an edition of Proust that I'm aware of.
I don't think so, no.
I mean, I know he's done literature before, but he also does a lot of serious nonfiction.
Yes.
I don't want to say philosophy, but in that realm.
Yeah. He teaches at Harvard too, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, we had him a couple times at Albertine talking about, it was definitely more nonfiction stuff.
It's interesting to see. I'm curious. I wonder how many people read this, and I've only read I haven't read the whole in Search of Lost Time.
Oh yeah, plenty of people. We definitely sold a lot of complete sets in the French to American people who were giving it to their precocious teenagers, I'm sure.
Yeah, I bet. So
Hammer did. I don't know if you looked up his bio or anything at this point, but I think he did Alexis de Tocqueville as well.
Oh, okay.
For Library of America or something like that.
That totally makes sense.
That's why we have him. But it's considered the definitive, whatever the name of that is, Democracy in America. Anyway, that is interesting.
The other thing that happened yesterday, I guess, was it yesterday? Wednesday, yeah, yesterday, was the announcement of Granta's new list of the best young American novelists, which I felt like we should just comment on in some general way. There's the list that you can find online pretty easily. Some of the names include Jesse Ball, Emma Klein, Joshua Cohen, Mark Doughton, Lauren Groff, Geisy, Garth Risk-Hallberg, who's been on this podcast before. Flipping over, Ben Lerner, Danelle Mengestu, Otessa, did you say her Mashfag? I'm not sure how you say her name. And some other people. But anyways, it's kind of, I don't know, it's an interesting list, because this time I looked this up to see if I was misremembering. So this is the third time that Granta's come out with a list of the best young American novelists. They all have to be under the age of 40 at the time of publication of the magazine, I believe. So they came out with the list in 1996, one in 2007, and then this one just earlier this week. And my thought initially when I looked at it was how surprised I was at how many of these people I already know, or that if I know their books. I might not have read all of them, but I'm aware of them compared to the past list. And I thought, well, maybe that's just wrong. And I went back and looked. And so the 2007 one being the most recent, there's a lot of names I know on here, but also a lot of people I just don't recognize still. And I wonder if that's just because either things have sort of, these people are all fairly prominent. Almost all of these are pretty prominent authors. There's not a lot of people on here where it's who is this? They have one book and I've never heard of them before. They're all fairly prominent. If that's kind of more of the vein that they're going in, or simply that I'm just more connected to reading books now than 10 years ago, or being aware of what's coming out. I'm not entirely sure, but the 1996 list in particular, I still don't know most of these people.
Yeah. I don't know. The list seems... I'm reading this article from The Guardian that I assume was just published at the exact same time about the people, of course, who were left off the list. Which, whatever. But I don't know. It does seem to skew young, is what their implication is.
Yeah, yeah.
The books... The writers that are on the list this year seem to have written books that one would consider fresh, as opposed to writers. Although Jesse Ball is a notable exception. The guy's been around forever and written 7 novels or something.
Yep.
Most of them are they've written 1 or 2 novels and that's it, and so they still seem quote unquote fresh in our minds, and that seems to be what they're highlighting. Although, who knows? I didn't realize they were actual judges. I thought it was just the Granta editorial board chose that or something.
Right. No, it's Patrick DeWitt, A.M. Holmes, Kelly Link, Ben Marcus, and publisher Sigurd Rousing. So
I never understood the point of these lists.
Publicity.
I get for whom?
Both the magazine and the writers.
I guess. I don't know. It just seems like you said. These, I feel like I've heard of everyone on the list, and maybe it's because I own a bookstore. But part of it is these people are just the same old writers that we keep hearing about. And yes, they have to have had a novel published, but why not? There are very few writers on there who wrote novels that were published by very small presses that no one is, that are very good that no one has heard of,
Right, yeah. And that's why I wondered if the past ones had that sort of surprise person on it. But 2007 is Daniel L. Arcone, Kevin Brockmeyer, Anthony Doerr, Jonathan Safran Foer, Nell Freudenberger, Nicole Krauss, Ian Lee, ZZ Packer, Karen Russell, Gary Steingart, John Ray. Those are all big press writers.
Yep, all of them.
So maybe that's not true. Maybe it always has been so. But then there's ones on here I just don't know, Radowet Lepchernasop. I don't know who that is. So there it's possible that there are people that are in here that I'm just not aware of, and they do have they are published by small presses or something. But
couldn't tell you. It's one of those things that it's so insider baseball. I don't to read that article and be intrigued by that list. I don't know how many people are not already familiar with those people. It just seems like it exists for the sake of publicity that already exists.
Yeah. I don't think Emma Klein needs any more publicity.
Yeah, I don't know.
She's all over right now.
We're the people who are going to read this because we're curious, but we're also the people who already know all this stuff. So
maybe it helps them get better MFA jobs. It gives MFA students a new set of goals.
Yeah, but it's not like my mother, who reads a lot but isn't in publishing. She's never going to come across that list,
Yeah, I mean, unless you're a Granta subscriber. I don't know how many subscribers Granta has, but it's probably pretty significant. The one thing about that article that you're talking about that I thought was really weird was there's one breakdown where it's this is stylistically these people are all over the place, and it sort of gives examples, has a sort of backhanded compliment towards Garth for City on Fire, but then ends with, and we have Ben Lerner, whose work usually stands in for the closest thing American literature has right now to a bona fide trend, autofiction. And I thought that was kind of a tone-deaf statement, since autofiction has been more associated with French literature and is very old, and or maybe could be associated with Knausgaard. But is that a bona fide American trend? Is Ben Lerner the representative for this American trend of writing?
Is it a trend? I don't think it's a trend.
I don't think it's a trend either.
I mean, yes, 10 years ago, memoirs were all the rage, but that's a very different thing.
Yeah, all that French autofiction stuff, which existed for a while and was pretty popular, is slightly different than the memoir, but yeah, I don't know. Have you read his books before?
I never see the points of those things, so.
Fair enough. The other thing, I think the main thing that we wanted to talk about today, though, aside from those little bits, were any books that we're looking forward to reading over the summer, since we've done a lot of publishing business or things like that podcasts recently, and we haven't really talked too much about books. It seemed like a good time to get back towards, or to do one podcast that has to do with books that I might be looking forward to. So I wondered if you had anything that you were looking forward to reading this summer. Also, for me, this is always a big deal because my final class was today that I have to teach, and all I have to do now is when I get back from New York, I have to grade 20 papers and assign grades, which will be more traumatic for me than it will be for the students, since I have to give some poor grades this year. But it's the first time that I can finally not feel like I'm reading for school in since January. So this is always one of those moments where I don't know, no one else really marks it this way, but if you're a professor, I suppose that you might do this too, where it's oh, things are over, and it's wow, I can read for fun and not worry about like having to get this ready for my class, or like how am I going to talk about this book to my class? Like what are going to be my bits? So it's finally like I always store up like huge stacks of things that I want to get to, which I'll never be able to get to and never be able to read because there's not enough time and all that kind of stuff. But it's sort of fun to like finally have a chance to like dream about things I might be able to start reading. And I wondered if you had anything that you were looking forward to.
I have one because you sprung this on me sort of last minute, and I am just one of the bookstores in Providence lost its lease and had to relocate, and in the process, it's like an old antiquarian / used store. They had a sale, to try to help raise funds for their new building and all that. Anyway, so I went and bought some old used books, and I've been reading through those. It's like old copies of like Chandler and random things like that I hadn't read, which is not very interesting for our readers. That said, I do have one that I pulled out from my galley list that is not a translation, unfortunately, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's fascinating to me, which is October, the story of the Russian Revolution by China Miéville, published by Verso. It just came out, I think.
I really want to read that too.
I got a galley. Verso was at Winter Institute for the first time, and they gave me whatever I wanted, basically. But I have a copy of it, so I'm going to, as soon as I finish the book I'm reading now, which I'm reading a book by a PM press, who is another anarchist sort of press. China Miéville is famous for writing sort of anarchist-themed mystery / thriller sci-fi sort of books. So his take on the Russian Revolution will be interesting. But PM Press is an Oakland-based anarchist press, and apparently back in the early 2000s or late 90s, they had a line of mystery books called Switchblade, and I'm reading one of those, and I'm not getting a whole lot of lefty politics sort of stuff in there, at least not yet, but it's a good little book. So anyway, so yes, China Miéville on the Russian Revolution. It's very unclear to me. I'm trying to figure out if it's a novel or a history book.
I read the bit that was in, so Publishers Weekly included this in their best summer books of 2017. I read their description, and that was my first thought too, is this like history or is this like a fictionalized take on it?
It says in like the very first sentence on Verso's own website, he provides his own distinctive take on its history. Like,
right, but that could mean anything.
Yeah. It's very unclear. I wonder what Amazon classifies it as.
Yeah, that would be, or Edelweiss.
Oh yeah, I always forget that I have Edelweiss access because I hate it so much.
Oh God, they have a new version. So, have you read any of his other books?
Years ago, it's one of those things like everyone's like, you'll love this, you'll love this, you'll love this, just because they know my politics. And I just, for whatever reason, have never really dug into him.
Yeah. I read one book, City in the City, and I thought it was pretty good, but it was like, I think maybe I had high expectations because I sort of had him built up as like, oh, he's going to be really spectacular. And it was totally fine. But there were a lot of moments where it felt a little workaday, but it was cool. I just haven't gone back to read any of them since.
Yeah, I read Perdido Street Station.
Oh,
definitely
so that's
more
like the real.
Yeah. Amazon lists this as politics and social science history. So I guess that's what we're treating it as. I expected not to read like a typical history book. So.
Yeah. It's listed on his Wikipedia page as nonfiction, which he's written other nonfiction books, including Between Equal Rights, A Marxist Theory of International Law, Red Planets, Marxism and Science Fiction. That sounds interesting. Pathfinder Chronicles, Guide to the River Kingdoms. I don't know what that means. And then October, The Story of the Russian Revolution.
So yeah, it's also not... What do I have here?
Dude, that Pathfinder one, it's about a role-playing game. It's like a D&D thing.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely nonfiction. There's like an index and a glossary and all that.
Oh.
320 pages, and it's, I expect it to read pretty quickly. So
nice. Very cool.
What about you? That's the only one I could think of off the top of my head.
I have a few that are in front of me, but the the main thing that I plan on doing this summer, which is going to like sort of short circuit this whole this whole conversation, is rereading a lot of stuff, because I feel like I finally, like, I'm getting old, and joking ways getting old, but also in like legitimate ways getting old. So that, like, things that I consider books that I really liked, or that were like books that I read and would refer to as like, oh, some of my favorite books of all time, I don't remember like basically at all, because my memory is shitty to begin with. But like, I started thinking about like, specifically that I'm going to be I want to reread Ulysses at the beginning of this summer, and I read that 20 years ago for the first time, and I realized 20 years ago was like half my life. So half a lifetime ago, I read a book and thought that it was amazing, and I really liked it, and my memory of that is just invented. So I wanted to reread things like that, and reread Hopscotch by Cortázar, and Absalom by William Faulkner specifically, and I think Lolita as well, because that one's not quite as long, but that's been 20 years too. All these books I read 20 years ago, and really liked them. So I sort of planning on doing that, among other things. But as we'll talk about in a minute, I'll just footnote this for now, is I'll also be rereading The Invented Part, because we're going to be doing this supplemental podcast that I'll talk about in a minute. And so I'm rereading that too. So I'm mostly rereading a lot of stuff. It's kind of going to be a weird experience, I think. But I was looking through the new books, and the things that I was most excited about, one of them is a long-ass Bulgarian book that's coming up from Archipelago. I believe it comes out in the middle of May. And their press release says April 18th, but I don't believe this is actually out yet. And it's called Wolf Hunt by Ivailo Petrov, and it's translated by Angela Rodell, who did Georgy Gospodinov's Physics of Sorrow, and who I really like. And she had talked about this to my class once when she was working on it, as being this like grand book. It came out in '86, but it's sort of about like the impact of communist policies on villagers in Bulgaria, and it's supposed to be incredibly funny and dark and weird, and it's both Faulknerian and that all those sort of influences. It's also 580 pages in the Archipelago format. So it's big, long book. But I'm curious about this because it even has a blurb from Georgy Gospodinov on it. So that's probably like at the top of my list of the books that are coming out this summer, or one of the two that are at the top of my list for the books coming out this summer that I'd want to read for the first time. As a side note to that, I don't know if you saw this, but Georgy Gospodinov won one of the Cullen Fellowships, so he's going to be in New York from October through May of next year, working on a new novel.
Cool.
Yes, very cool. So we're going to do some series of events, or some events for Physics of Sorrow and whatever else, and hopefully see how his new novel comes.
Well, if you can get him up to Providence,
we probably could. Just
it's like a 3-hour train ride.
Yeah. He'd totally be game for that. Come do a thing.
Yeah, and I love that book and would be happy to host him. You can always squeeze something in with Brown too, if
Very true.
Sneaky about it. It's funny you mentioned rereading these things from 20 years ago. I am in a similar boat to you, where like a lot of the thing. I mean, we're basically the same age, but I didn't read a lot of the more contemporary stuff that you're talking about until I was out of college and in the Peace Corps with plenty of time to read. So not only did I read Lolita, and I have never read Absalom. I've read As I Lay Dying and some other Faulkner. And then I read Ulysses and some other stuff in that vein. Virginia Woolf I was reading at the time. In the Peace Corps, by myself, in the middle of nowhere, with no reference material, with no internet. So, because in college I read, Shakespeare and Chaucer, and then some early novel sort of stuff. And I didn't read anything modern. So not only have I not read Ulysses in 18 years in my case, but I read it by myself without talking about it to anyone outside the classroom. Which, look, I hate school, so whatever. I didn't miss that experience. But not being able to talk to anyone about it, and I'm not talking like book club, but just anybody, like at the end of the day, very weird experience. So I have like a very, like, I'm pretty sure I understood the novel and I understand what's going on in it, but yeah, I should probably reread that at some point. Lolita, I feel like I've gone back to and reread certain parts. over and over. And I've also read a lot of Nabokov since then, so I don't feel as distant to that. But yeah, Ulysses is a tough one.
Yeah, Lolita, I read all of those books this summer after I graduated from college. Literally, all four of those. Which is why that sort of came to mind. But Lolita, I don't think I've ever gone back to. I've read almost all Nabokov. The one that I would love to read this summer if I can find time is Ada or Adder or Ardor, however you're supposed to. I always screw it up. Yeah, Ada, which I have not read.
That book.
Yeah, I know you said that before. It seems like it's one that I would still be way into. I read like 60 pages of it once in between things and liked it, but then the between things became things.
Yeah. I really like Penin.
Penin's awesome.
Really underappreciated one. Real Life of Sebastian Knight is fantastic.
That's really good too.
If anyone's looking to go on a little Nabokov bender.
I would like to reread Pale Fire too, because I read that while I was in college on a winter break and was like, I don't know what the fuck this is all about. I think I get it, but I'm not entirely sure. And that was like the Ulysses situation for you, but like weirder in a way because there's like, because all of your ground is unstable. Like with Ulysses, you'd be like, I just don't understand these little like the references or like the hidden things. But with Pale Fire, it could be like, I don't really understand what the fuck this poem is or where this came from.
Yeah, I read that, I don't know, about 10 years ago. The edition of Pale Fire that I read way back when was a mass market that was so old you could see the lines on the other side of the page. So I still have it, but I can't reread that edition. So I've since gotten another copy and keep meaning to reread it, but haven't gotten to it yet.
He and Faulkner are two of the authors that when the new packages come out, I end up buying all of them again. I'm like, I'm the ultimate sucker for their packaging for those two authors and Cortázar to a lesser extent. That like when they come out with new versions, like, oh, I'd really like to reread Lolita. I would like it in this new cover version instead of the one that I have. And I'll buy it. Like I rebuy those books a lot for no good reason.
I'm a sucker for Philip K. Dick.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like I do not need another copy of Valis.
Jesus Christ, me neither. I almost bought that again not too long ago.
I'm also a sucker for buying like the old mass market random edition from the mid '80s as well, because those are just beautiful.
I feel like I would do that, but I don't go to used bookstores very often because the ones here, there's like a creepy one that I really don't want to go to, and then there's a really nice one that I like, but I don't go to it that often. Greenwood, but I like that place, but I just don't get there very often. I don't know that she has so much of that kind of stuff. It's more tailored towards like the academics around here. So,
yeah, I mean, I will say I notice because a lot of used stores also have the sort of sales tracking software that new stores have. And so they're, I think, a little bit, I don't want to say smarter, but they're a little savvier in their minds about what they stock in terms of somebody like Philip K. Dick. And so they won't buy those used editions of whatever, the 10th most popular Philip K. Dick novel, because they know they're not going to resell it for many, many years.
Yeah.
But they'll keep buying, Total Recall and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and that sort of thing. And so you end up in this situation where you go into a used store and you're like, oh, let's see what Philip K. Dick they have, and they have the same 3 books over that it has, which is unfortunate. I do appreciate a completist sort of approach to those sorts of things. And I mean, even it's always been my theory in terms of the new bookstore as well, is like, look, I don't have every Philip K. Dick on the shelf, but I'm going to have more than just the 3 that everyone has heard of. Right. I want to get in there. And the same thing with like, you can do this for Faulkner, you can do it for Nabokov, like all kinds of people where they're the 2 that everyone's heard of, but then there are so many other good ones. And if you just give people a reason to read them or pick them up, you'll sell a few copies a year. It's not going to become a bestseller or anything, but at least it gets people to, dig through the backlist a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. And those are authors that once you see how many books they have, I feel like sometimes you just go into it. I read Philip K. Dick for me is someone that at some point in time, not now, but like later, I would go back and reread bunches of them, but I'd have to pace it because when I read all of those, I read 30 of his books over a year. And like, Jesus Christ, those are jumbled in my mind. Like which plot goes with which or what. That's all gets very confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same sort of mixed memory of a lot of Philip K. Dick. I probably read over the course of 2 years, like 25 of his book. And there's some that are very distinct, but not necessarily because of the books, but because of, like, for example, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep became Blade Runner, so we all know it. And now, like, The Man in a High Castle, which I've not even seen the show, but having read the book, like I definitely remember it very clearly. And the one that goes with that, Palmer Eldridge and the Three Stigmata, like all of those are like very distinct. And then there's a whole bunch where like I'm putting random things together. There's also the problem with him where he has short story versions of those longer things, or at least like elements. And it's like, okay, is that from the story? Is that from the novel? And it's definitely complicated.
Absolutely. In a similar vein, are you a fan of Kobo Abe?
Never read him.
Really?
Nope.
Holy shit. You should get the Boxman and read that. Now, you like Samuel Beckett to some degree, right?
Oh, I love Beckett, yeah.
I thought so. Yeah, you'd like the Boxman quite a bit. And there's a new book of Kobo Abe's, new in the sense that it's never been translated before, coming out from Columbia this month as well, well, I don't know what month it is anymore. May. It's coming out in May. I believe it's an early book of his, which might be a little bit different than some of the later ones, which are very stylized and very, very crazy and tend to shift perspective a lot and like do weird things with like plot and narrative. But it's called Beasts Head for Home. And I'll just read the description because I wouldn't do it better. Following his nation's defeat in the Pacific War, Kuko Kyuzo, a Japanese youth, struggles to return home to Japan from Manchuria. What follows is a wild journey involving drugs, smuggling, chases, and capture. Kyuzo finally makes his way back to Japan, but finds himself unable to disembark. His nation remains inaccessible to him, and now he questions its very existence. Beasts Head for Home is an acute novel of identity belonging in the vagaries of human behavior from an exceptional Japanese modern author. But that's one of the other ones that's at the top of my list for the summer of books I haven't read to go to. It's translated by Richard Kalichman, who I don't know, but like I do like the Kobo Abe. I read almost all of his books at some point in time over like a summer and really got into him and really dug him. And I really wanted to publish. At that point in time, the Arc Sakura was out of print and Open Letter was just starting, and we really wanted to publish that. But like once Random House found out, then they put it into like print on demand and kept the rights forever and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like something I would like if I were in the right mood.
Boxman is great. Boxman is the one I'd most highly recommend. And then maybe Woman in the Dunes is the most famous, but I don't like that one as much because it's a little bit it feels a little bit more straightforward allegorical. Like it's a little too whatever.
On the nose?
Yeah, a little too on the nose and a little bit too much like, okay, this is the kind of crazy allegory that most people will get and be able to respond to and not feel too overwhelmed by. Whereas I like the more Boxman type ones where it's like, man, I don't really know what's going on. Like I like being lost a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, to bring this back, that's a little bit of why I think I like Philip K. Dick, is because it's not like the sci-fi where it's like, this stands in for this, or this is where humanity's going.
Yeah.
He instead just explores like one little tick of humanity and like what that would look like if it were magnified and that sort of thing. It's far more interesting.
Absolutely.
It's fun. I'm on the Goodreads page for the Boxman, and readers also enjoyed is John Hawkes. So,
oh yeah, that makes sense too.
God, I hope you're keeping track of all these books we've mentioned because it's been quite a few.
I'll just name some of that, or name some of the authors in some cases.
Okay.
Do you have other ones that you're looking forward to?
It's funny when you mention rereading, because I've been thinking of rereading Dennis Johnson, the Tree of Smoke for a while now, and God, I love that book and love Dennis Johnson. There's also somebody I follow on Twitter buys like every used copy, like we were just talking about, of like old 80s editions of Dennis Johnson. He's written so many books that like no one talks about because everyone only has read Jesus' Son and then maybe Tree of Smoke. But he's got so many of these, like, I don't want to say campus novels or like road novels, but they do sort of loosely fit into those genres from like before he wrote Jesus' Son. And they're really good. I read one a couple of years ago whose name I'm totally going to forget, but they are really good. I would love to dig up some of those type of things and reread them. Or like Richard Price's early books are really good, that sort of thing.
Some of these early ones that you might be referring, Angels, Piscadoro, Stars at Noon, Resuscitation of a Hanged Man. Those all came out. Those are all novels that came out before Jesus' Son.
So I read the first two of those. Angel's really good. The third and fourth you mentioned, never even heard of. So need to go find those.
Yeah, there's a lot. The other I was looking through too, and another one of my favorite authors that has a book coming out this summer, I assume, is António Lobo Antunes, the Portuguese author. I've read, I think, everything that's been translated so far. I don't think I missed anything. But Rhett McNeil has a translation of one of his books, Warning to the Crocodiles, which takes place after, sort of traditionally Antunes-like, takes place in the aftermath of the Carnation Revolution of April 25th, 1974, told from a bunch of different perspectives, of memories of 4 women who spend their days fashioning homemade explosives and participating in the kidnap and torture of communists. So the novel details the clandestine activities of an extreme right-wing Salazarist faction resisting the country's new embrace of democracy. Like, fucking sign me up. Sounds right up my alley. I don't know if this is a new book of his because there's no like search inside the book function, and I'm not familiar with it. So
it's new to you. That's all.
New to me. But I'd look forward to that too, but I'm going to have to buy it because Delkey doesn't send us their books.
Or anyone. It's not just you.
Yeah. I think that's the case.
So you're not going to dig into Bottom's Dream?
The book that will, when whoever wins the Best Translated Book Award next week, there will be a faction, a contingent of human beings, both in person and online, that will continue to argue that it should have been Bottom's Dream and that the whole thing is void because Bottom's Dream didn't win. But no, I'm not. I've looked at it. I respect it, but to be honest, like, I like crazy shit. And I read a couple pages of that online, and it's like, I don't know that I like this crazy shit.
Yeah, there's a limit, right? Like, it almost feels like performance art, right? Where, like, it's impressive, and I appreciate that other people appreciate it, and I understand why. And I can see why somebody might get obsessed with it, but it's not for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I love Finnegan's Wake. Don't get me wrong. I'm into that edge of things, but, like, yeah, I just couldn't. And maybe it's just that it was like random pages, right? Like the pictures that show up online are probably like the craziest ass pages that could be found. But still, I think that one goes beyond my limit.
Yeah. Any more?
I don't think so. I think those are the main ones that I had down. The only other thing that I have in front of me that I thought looks interesting, and I would like to read, is Guillermo Cabrera Infante's Map Drawn by a Spy, which is nonfiction. I believe they're categorizing it as nonfiction. It doesn't come out until August, though, but I have the galley of it. And it's about him, I guess it's him trying to get out of Havana, and goes through like history of Cuba and Havana and that situation in the 60s, which is always interesting to me, but mostly because I really like Infante, although when I was at Delkey, we reprinted Three Trapped Tigers and Infante's Inferno, and I really like both those books, especially Three Trapped Tigers. I think it's brilliant. And then I was supposed to meet him in London, and he died like 2 weeks before I was supposed to meet him, if that. But then we looked at some of his other books at that point in time that were like nonfiction stuff. Like, he wrote a lot about film, and I didn't like any of it. So I'm excited by this and hesitant at the same time.
Well, dig in anyway. That's my advice.
Yep. You can always quit.
Yeah, definitely. I see a lot of things on my shelf. I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm looking forward to this because there's a very good chance I'll read 5 pages and be bored and put the book down. So
I do have
anything.
I do have one last one that I have to throw in there because I'm curious as to your relationship to this. So I've been rewatching all of Twin Peaks for the new season. And there's a podcast that goes along with it that I've been listening to. But and it's fun. I forgot how much I really like Twin Peaks, especially towards the end. Like I always liked it, but like it does get pretty cool. And there's a book that's out from Mark Frost that's like the secret history of Twin Peaks. That's one of these it's very cool put together book, but it's got like the archivist sort of feel to it, where like different things are in different fonts. Some look like they're typescript, some are pictures, all this kind of thing thrown together. And I will read that too. Like that's probably the book that I'm going to end up taking to New York, because it's like, maybe not, because it's not easy to carry on like subways because it's big and weird, but it's the one that's like the furthest away from all of the work that I've been doing for the university. That is the furthest end away from that in a lot of ways. So I'm down with that. But are you going to try and watch? Are you a Twin Peaks fan? Are you going to try and watch this new season when it starts in May?
I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan. I don't know that I'll watch the new season. I'll probably give it a try. I don't know where. I mean, I'm not going to worry about spoilers. Where does it? The show was on 20 years ago, people. 30 years ago. Go watch it. Where does it pick up?
That is from what I know, there are basically no real details that have been released about the plot, except that it's going to be taking place 25 years after the end of that, because of Laura in the Red Room saying it happens every 25 years. So it's set 25 years after the end of the second season. And a lot of the same people are back. And apparently David Lynch is directed and did all 18 episodes, quote unquote episodes. But I've also heard, and I'm sure that people are way into this, have read all the spoilers and all the information. I'm not doing that. I'm like on media blackout related to like the new season stuff. I just know that it exists. And the one thing that I heard was some comment about how when they announced that it was going to be coming out on May 21st, I think is the premiere, but they're not certain how they're going to release it. Because apparently it sounds like what he turned in was like an 18-hour movie.
Well, that does not surprise me.
And so they're like, we might do like 3 episodes in a week, and then 1, and then a break, and then 4. Like it doesn't look like it doesn't sound like he split it up as like, here's a 50-minute episode and new 50-minute episode, but like one continuous sort of episode sort of thing.
Wait, who produced it?
Showtime's doing it.
Okay, so it'll air at some point on Showtime.
Yes.
Sunday night or whatever, right? Okay.
May 21st or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll probably give it a try. I love Twin Peaks, the show. I've seen it a few times, front to back. I love all the characters.
Except for James.
Fire Walk with Me is a masterpiece of a movie, is a prequel. Yeah, I'm definitely going to give it a try. Unrelated side note, or sort of related, I was watching an old Paul Newman. Does that sound right? Robert Redford movie. Redford, called Brubaker.
Really?
Which is based on a novel that I can't remember who wrote it. But anyway, it's basically he's like a good prison warden. He wants to be a good warden. And so he goes undercover as a prisoner, as an inmate in his own prison. And not even the guards know or anything like that. One of the main guards, mind you, this was made in like 1979, I want to say.
Uh-huh.
One of the main guards is, I don't know what the actor's name, but Big Ed from...
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah. And I'm watching it for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, I know that guy. Who is that guy? But he's like, much younger and skinnier, but like the voice and like the way he walks and all of that sort of stuff was very interesting. Because a lot of those people in Twin Peaks, you just like, apart from Kyle MacLachlan, like who else had you heard of when that show started?
I don't know that I'd heard of Kyle MacLachlan when that show started, to be honest. Some of the people that show up in there that are weird that had glitter crews, Heather Graham's in there, but I'm at the episode where Annie, her character, first appears.
Right.
But the person that threw me was Billy Zane. Where I was like, yes, and the problem I had when I saw Billy Zane was like, where the fuck do I know you from? And I started looking through the movies. It's like, I've never seen Titanic. And then I got to like Back to the Future, and I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly why Billy Zane is Billy Zane.
Yeah, I knew he was in Titanic. When I watched Twin Peaks like as an adult for the first time. I was like, oh my God, look at him. What is he doing on this set? He looks absurd.
He's got crazy hair.
Crazy hair. He looks way too pretty. Like it's just very weird.
He's amazing. But yeah, and like Sherilyn Fenn, that was like one of her early things.
Yeah. And who did Grace Zubinsky? The mother?
Laura's mom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's really great. But I saw her she's in a few episodes, like a whole season basically, of that show, The Killing.
What is it?
It's called The Killing.
Oh, The Killing. She's in that? Oh, I don't. I know that show, but I didn't watch that. That's wild. She's in Twin Peaks. She's always screaming and crying. So I hope that's what she does in The Killing as well.
No, she's looking very surly, smoking, and basically the same character without like having a dead daughter.
Oh man, so it's unfortunate because a lot of the people from Twin Peaks passed away, and recently too, which is kind of unfortunate. Like
oh God, what's her name? The woman who owns the
Peggy Lipton, the diner woman.
Not her. The woman who's like running the guy who owns the Great Northern, the woman he's having an affair with.
Catherine Martell?
Yeah, didn't she just die?
Piper Laurie?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't know. She is still alive.
She is still alive. Somebody from that show just died. Yeah. Anyway.
Man, Piper Laurie is old though. Do you want to guess when Piper Laurie was born? I mean, Piper Laurie was in The Hustler in 1961, Carrie in 1976, Twin Peaks, so on and so forth. She was born in 1932.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, wild.
Doing something right.
Yep.
Yeah, I forget why I was thinking of that show the other day. I can't remember.
Piper Laurie dated Ronald Reagan.
That's insane.
Because they were in a movie together, Louisa.
That's crazy.
Yep. So that's the other book that I'm plugging is Secret History of Twin Peaks, which I think is semi cheesy and maybe gives too much explanation and probably isn't like necessarily related to the show, but like it's a nice world to inhabit after, whatever.
If you can somehow get your hands on a copy, if you have the DVD edition of Twin Peaks, the gold DVD edition, at the end of that is an entire DVD of extra features, including, sit-down interviews with David Lynch and like in the Great Northern's bar, all sorts of stuff like that. There's also like a very in-depth sort of look at the people who, make the annual trek to wherever it was shot in Washington State.
Yeah.
To like cherry stem tying contests.
There's so many iconic images from that show.
And what else? Like throwing a rock at a bottle.
Yep.
Like they in the woods and that sort of thing. Donut stacking, like all these random things that like super nerdy people go, obviously, and take part in. And this was like, they probably shot this in like, early 2000s. So it's like before all of this became like, up really, really famous. So these people were, just living it up in their own little world. This is like before Comic-Con, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, there was also like a costume party. And the guy who won, I think, was, what's the truck driver's name?
Hank?
No,
Leo. Sorry, Leo.
Yeah, so like Zombie Leo, where she puts like where the kid and his wife put the like birthday party thing on him, and oh god, it's hilarious.
That scene when he comes back to life is terrifying. Now we're way off, and I could go on about this because I've been
way
rewatching
off the rails here about Twin Peaks.
But Leo's terrifying at times.
So you're listening to a podcast about a show that you've already seen?
Yeah, it's recapping each episode, essentially one by one, and has guests on there and various other things. And it's pretty. I find it entertaining because I like I don't know. I don't know why I like it exactly. I like the banter. I like the sort of back and forth and going over and pointing out things that are weird or like funny about the show and rewatching it. And I haven't rewatched that in a long time either. So like there's a whole sequence of episodes that I always would skip with all the James shit because I hate him. So I watched them this time and went through them, and that was brutal. Those episodes are terrible. But now I'm back to like the other. I'm through the Looking Glass and into like the ramp up of the last 5 episodes with Wyndham Earle and all the fun stuff.
Yeah, the James stuff is really a slog.
It's horrible. They have Diane Keaton directs one of those episodes.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always loved the Air Force guy. He's fantastic.
Yeah, Major Briggs.
Yeah,
I love Major Briggs too. I wonder. Yeah, I think he might be coming back for the 3rd season, but I don't know.
Yeah,
he'd be interesting. I like that.
We're really, really off topic.
Way far. Okay, so way far away. But we'll bring this back and sort of wrap this up since it's in an hour. That sort of tied in a way to that is that we're going to start. I guess on Tuesday, a new sort of mini episodes that'll be coming out. In your 3% feed, you have to do nothing different. These will just pop up every Tuesday, almost every Tuesday, of something that we're calling the 2-month review. That will be taking essentially like a weekly half-hour podcast about a particular book and just reading that same book slowly but surely over a 2-month period. And the first book is The Invented Part by Rodrigo Frazan. So we're going to have a podcast that comes out on Tuesday that's with myself and Brian Wood, who's a local friend and writer, and Linton Smith, who's a translator of Thomas Jansson bestseller and other Icelandic books. And he's on there because Thomas Jansson is going to be the second book we do this for. But then starting on May 16th, there'll be a short episode introducing Invented Part and talking about like the sort of scheme of things, some background information to Frazan, to this book, to whatever else. And the translator Will Vanderheiden will be on for that. And then kicking off officially on June 1st, we'll be reading approximately 60 pages a week and recapping that, going over it, talking about things that sort of spin out of there with various guests. I'm going to do the first one, the Invented Part, with Brian, and then various guests will come on to do different sections. For instance, we have Jonathan Letham's coming on to do one of the sections that will air in late June because he's a big fan of Frazan's, and there's a section that is perfect for him. But we're sort of going to try and make it fun and like sort of go off of like talking about the book and making it sort of like interesting where you can learn about the book and learn about how it's put together and what's going on and other things for it in like a slow kind of methodical fashion, but using that as like a springboard to talk about like The Invented Part's great because it's got so many pop culture references, like all the sections about Burroughs, all the sections about 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I'm trying to get someone on who's like an expert in that. All the sections about the Kinks, about Pink Floyd, all that kind of fun stuff. And then that will run through June and July. And then right after that, the next quote-unquote season, I guess, would start with Thomas Jansson bestseller, which is a very dense Ulysses-like. It's the Icelandic Ulysses is what they usually refer to. It's a wild book. It's an old guy that is retired from being a banker, and he's going to write his own memoir that's going to become famous, but he just gets all muddled because he's senile, and he rants, and things are very funny, but also like stylistically wild and fun. And this one, Linton will be on to talk about each time. And he translated the book, and we're still like sort of puzzling out what's going on in different sections. So that one might have a little bit more of like if you're trying to read this book and you want to read along, you might have this might be actually more than just advantageous. It might help clarify a lot because that book is crazy to read. It's complicated and very rewarding, but like, yeah, it's dense.
So, So can you clarify for people once again? So this is in the broader sense, you're going to be doing one book over how many episodes and how much time?
Over 2 months, which both of these first 2 times works out to be 9 weeks. So 9 episodes. And it'll post a full schedule that says like, so for example, the podcast that will go up on June 1st will cover the first 45 pages of The Invented Part, the first section called The Real Character. And then the second one will go up on June 8th, and that will cover the next 42 pages. But it's laid out in each one. So if you want to follow along, you can follow along with that and listen to the podcast. There'll also be additional posts on 3% about things, sometimes more serious, sometimes just quotes from the book. And then there is set up at Goodreads a group called 2 Month Review that you can join and throw in your own personal comments that we could use on the episodes, or just that if you want to say anything, or if you don't want to say anything, or if you have questions or whatever it might be, it's a way that people could interact with it. So in a sense, it's like a 2-month long slow burn book club.
Cool.
Hopefully.
I don't know that I'll be participating in any of these, partly because of the complications of recording me as well as all these guests get a little difficult when none of us are in the same spot. So
right, you can. I was going to ask if you want to. Well, we'll talk about it separately. But there's various ones that if you want to be on a section, that is awesome. As like because we're always going to have 3 people is the goal. So
okay,
if you want to be a guest, that is perfect. But I don't know what timings you have, or if you have time to read some of these longer books. But I'm also hoping that to get like the guy that I want to get for the 2001 thing, I haven't talked to this person yet, but I wanted him to just read the section about 2001 because he has a book about it and just talk about 2001. We're also having a guy on that deals with like physics, because there's a whole bit in the invented part. The whole kind of main plot is that the narrator author wants to break into CERN and merge with the God particle. And so I want this person on there to talk about the physics of what the God particle is and whether you could transcend space and time by merging with it. Of which the answer is no.
We just watched I Heart Huckabees.
Oh, yeah.
And there's very early on in the movie, they ask, whatever his name is, Jason Schwartzman. They ask him, have you ever transcended space and time? And he's like, yes, of course. Wait, no, space, not time. No, I have no idea what you're talking about. It's true. It's like the most ridiculous thing you could possibly. What the fuck does that mean? Transcend space and time.
Oh man. Yes.
So I would love to come on and talk about Pink Floyd, as obsessed as I am with Pink Floyd.
I need to figure out which section that is that has the most Pink Floyd in it. And I will tell you. I will send it to you. I have it open. That's what I was doing today for part of the day, was like searching through like, where does this occur the most? And trying to figure out who would be good for that. But yeah, I will find it. I'm
an amateur Pink Floyd expert, but
Perfect.
But I am very, very obsessed with all of their music and their whole story, and
You know who else is Jeremy Garber, who is going to be on the first episode.
Is that true?
Yep.
I guess that makes sense. It's hard to tell. I don't know. I feel like Pink Floyd fans come out of the woodwork. I feel like all of us have one thing in common, and is that we did a lot of acid at some point in our lives.
I listened to Pink Floyd when I was in college and high school, quite a bit. So a good section for you would be the very last section, but because it's Bob Dylan and Pink Floyd.
Oh God.
I did, and when I was in college, but after that, I really have not, at all. I
listen to it off and on, definitely. I used to be obsessed with The Wall, and now I'm more into the shorter sort of concept albums. But I do love I love concept albums. Just give me a good concept album, all over that.
Right on.
But yeah, I've seen the documentary about Sid and all that sort of stuff. I find the whole thing fascinating.
Let's do. I'll find the section that has the most in it, because I'm glancing through it now, and there's a bunch of them. And I think I know which one it would be, and it might actually be the same as the 2001. So I'll do a part with you on Pink Floyd and a part on 2001.
Cool. I have much less to say about that, mainly because I would hate to say something wrong about that. Even though I've seen the movie several times and love Kubrick, Kubrick people are their own special breed of experts.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of too.
Don't want to get something wrong.
Very obviously. And then Thomas Johnson, I don't know if this is a book that you'd like, but it's super cool, and it really has all these wild aspects to it about things we didn't know. So when Litton was translating it, he was finding out it's I don't know what's going on in this section. He'd be talking to his people in Iceland who are some of the only people that have read this, obviously, and they're like, oh, well, what he's doing is he's making fun of, a lot of times the book's making fun of Helder Laxness and Helder Laxness type prose of the realist, countryman or country farmer glorified sort of thing. And it's playing with that because he was like had just won the Nobel Prize 10 years before this came out. But then there's a part that they're like, oh, well, that's in reference to these like medieval erotic epics that were written by Icelandic people. It's like a whole like the history of like erotic epics from Iceland that are just sort of like in here that if you don't know that, you'd be like, this is pretty funny, but I don't get it. And then you'd be like, oh, okay, now this makes a little bit more sense. So I think that version of this podcast will be fun because it will have a lot more things that are being unpacked or discovered and questions that like I don't think we have the answers to right away. Whereas the invented part, like, it's mostly like it's very enjoyable and fun and spins off. I think the Thomas Janssen one is going to be almost opposite to that, where it'll be more of like, what is this? And sort of trying to figure it out live.
Yeah. I mean, we rarely have time to do things like that on this podcast. And I think you and I are almost too similar in the way that we read and talk about books. And so it just doesn't work. But yeah getting other people involved would be good.
And hopefully it'll be a different way of people approaching stuff instead of just a list and the book is gone forever, 20 minutes later. Be able to like keep talking about things for a while and see what happens. So that's coming soon. The first one will come. The first one's not the best of recordings. Or at the top of the game, but I know it'll take a few episodes to really get a rhythm, but it's coming and I think it'll be fun. So anyone listening to this, you will get the podcast automatically in your feed. You have to do nothing, but you can always check in at 3% for like additional comments, posts, things like that.
Cool.
That's it. I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add of a rant or rave?
I just wanted to rant very quickly about this podcast called Up and Vanished, which everyone seems to love and which I do not understand because it is produced horribly. He repeats stuff. It's just, it's about it's like amateur fucking documentary filmmaker who decided he wanted to cash in on the true crime sort of obsession in the podcast world. And he lived in Georgia, so he's like, hey, what happened in Georgia that nobody solved? And so he found this thing and very shrewdly just started like digging into it. And apparently somebody gets arrested from it. I haven't quite gotten to that point in the podcast, but I'm too far in it now to quit, but I really wish I could because it's really frustrating to listen. There have been ads on the podcast that interrupt him mid-word.
Oh my God.
Mid-word. And yeah, it's just in generally like poorly edited and like overly produced in terms, like there's a guy with like one of his friends comes in and tries to do like the movie trailer sort of voice to say like, on June 23rd, Tara went missing. And it's like, it's really, then they have like voice actors reread like emails and things like, it's really just too much.
God, that sounds horrible. Although it reminds me of, to piggyback on this, you should, just for kicks, download the first episode or two of Finding Tammy Jo. It was one of these sort of podcasts from a year or so ago that our local newspaper, the Rochester newspaper, put out, which is weird because it's called Finding Tammy Jo, but it's not about finding Tammy Jo because they find Tammy Jo, she's dead in a cornfield, and they try and find her killer, which they don't find, and it's horrible. Like, it's the worst podcast I've ever listened to. And because it was local and because of whatever, I was like, I'll just keep going. Like, I want to power through and see what happens here. And it's a train wreck from start to finish. It's like basically a masterclass in what not to do with one of these sort of podcasts. But you should check it out. All the episodes are like 12 minutes long, so it wouldn't even take that much time. But you're going to be like, this sucks. And for some reason, in their feed, the very first podcast is just piano music. There's no words.
What the hell?
It's really bad. It's really bad. But I think it won Best Podcast of Rochester, according to whatever.
What the hell? How is this podcast not winning?
I don't know. Well, they don't count this because it's not about Rochester.
What if we just said the word Rochester more often?
We should have. Let's have one episode. The next episode should be the Rochester episode, which that could be the title, and it'll have nothing to do with Rochester.
Or like, yeah, we'll just put Rochester in more titles of the episode,
and then it'll just win. Exactly. It's basically a popularity contest, so like not super hard. Like we did. I was on there as a finalist for Best Author one year, which is amazing. And one of our books, Rochester Knockings by Hubert Haddad, who is, Algerian, writes in French, won for best local book.
There you go.
So, yeah, it's not impossible. It just takes a little voting.
It's like votes where you can just vote nonstop.
Pretty much, yeah. I think they eliminated that last year. I think that's why we didn't make it, but yeah. Yep. So I don't think I have anything else, but I guess I will see you in a week, and we'll have all the news about the Best Translated Book Award and anything that happens at Penn and whatever else in a couple weeks when we'll be back for this.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. I'll see you next Thursday, and hopefully some of our listeners as well.
Yeah. Come up and say hi.